You're looking at the, I'm going to say the end of the captivity of Joseph into his rise to power here this morning. And I was just, as I was reading and looking at this, I want to kind of jump into the middle of the story. We know that Joseph was cast into prison falsely. Potiphar's wife was lied about him. And if we backed up even further, his brothers caught him and slew him and threw him in the pit. Reuben was going to try to do right by him and take him out later, but the other brothers, they said, you know what, we're going to take care of business. They saw the troop coming and they sold him off into slavery there. And then he went down, like I said, was sold into Potiphar's house. And we'll bring out some more of this here in just a minute, but it's amazing to me how, we talked on Monday, how God sometimes takes us through the ways that we don't want to go to get us where He wants us to get to. And so if you look at the life of Joseph, I think Joseph would have liked to have gone from Canaan to Egypt and been able to save the world without having that interlude time in there of prison and slavery. But that's not the way life works, and that's not the way the Lord works, because He wants to teach us some things along the way. And when we get down here, Joseph has interpreted the dreams of he's been thrown in jail now after Potiphar's wife lied about him. He's interpreted the dreams of the butler and the baker, and those dreams have come to pass. And I can imagine that he's sitting there going, yes, this butler is going to help get me out of prison. My days are numbered. 2 years later, the butler remembers. The Bible says that in chapter 41 and verse number 9, then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh after Pharaoh had had his dream. He said, saying, I do remember my faults this day. Pharaoh, I messed up. I should have told you about this guy 2 years ago. The problem is, if he told him about this guy 2 years ago, Joseph would have been back in Canaan land. Yeah. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, verse number 10, and put me in a ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief butler. And we dreamed a dream in one night. I had the interpretation of the dream. And there was there a young man in Hebrew. Now look at this phrase. I want us just to think about this morning. A servant to the captain of the guard. A servant to the captain of the guard. Here's Joseph's. I know that he's a human being, and I'm going to kind of put myself in his spot for a little bit. I could imagine my attitude the first days of being sold into slavery there and being bought into Potiphar's house. I can imagine, at least in my room, in the place where I was staying, being in a little bit of the mully grubs, being in a place where I don't want to be here. But then after that, after a few days, I don't know, but you're saying, you know what, there's nothing I can do about it. I might as well make the best of it and go on with it and keep going. And have a good attitude about it. And Joseph has, I believe, adjusted his attitude. Then he gets lied about. He gets brought up into Pharaoh's house. He gets put in the charge of it. The Bible says that Potiphar, he didn't know what he had except the food on his table. He trusted Joseph that much. Yeah. Except when it came to matters of his wife. When his wife said, hey, he did this, Potiphar looked at him and said, sorry, you're going to jail. So he cast him into jail. And again, I can imagine Joseph going, you say, why can you imagine that? Because it's what we would do. It's what we would do. But in the midst of all this, he again adjusts his attitude and works his way back up to where he's the jailer's servant. He's the guy the jailer can give the keys to and say, here, go unlock that cell. He's the guy kind of a little bit of Andy Griffith here, but kind of the Otis, he can reach out to the cell door and get the keys and unlock himself and let himself out and go take care of business and then come put himself back in jail. He's not the town drunk, but I can imagine Joseph's got the keys. He can come and go out of jail because he stays in jail. He's the servant of the captain. He's gained that much trust. Why? Because of his attitude. Now, if you look over here, Joseph gets called out of prison. He shaves. He gets cleaned up. I don't know if there was a conversation between Joseph and the butler at this time. I'm sure somewhere along the way, the butler went over to him and said, look, I'm sorry about this. I forgot. It's my fault. I don't know if it was today or when, but I can imagine somewhere in the middle of all this, the butler trying to maybe slip over and go, sorry. Didn't mean to leave you there 2 years. So Joseph comes in. Pharaoh says, I hear you can tell me my dream. Joseph says, no, it's the Lord going to give the interpretation thereof. And he gives the and Pharaoh gives the dream. Now, remember we're talking about attitude, about this servant and this service. You've been thrown in jail by Potiphar. Then you've been left in jail by the butler. How are you going to interpret this dream? Let me back up. How are you going to communicate the interpretation of the dream? You dirty dogs. You're going to have 7 years of famine and be done with it. And it's going to be a grievous famine. You're going to have some years of plenty. You dirty dogs, you're going to get what you deserve. It's coming. But Joseph doesn't do. Joseph had the idea that he had the interpretation. He could have simply had a bad idea and a bad communication of the interpretation of the dream. And looked at them and said, you're going to get what you deserve. It's going to be 7 years of good and 7 years of plenty. I'm out of here. But that's not what he did. Amen. He has developed a good attitude. He's learned from his past mistakes. And when he comes in, he looks at Pharaoh and he says, Pharaoh, you're going to have 7 good years. And you're going to have 7 bad years. And Pharaoh, you got 2 dreams, but it's 1 interpretation. And the reason you got 2, it's going to be good. Going to be bad. He said, now Pharaoh, you better look out. You better get you a man. Find one of your servants out here that he's good with money. He's good with accounting. He's good with logistics. And you better put back some corn because the bad years are coming. Now think about this. He's in the throne room. Pharaoh's sitting on his throne. Joseph's just given the interpretation. We're going to look at verse 37. I don't know if Pharaoh dismissed Joseph for a minute. I don't know if Pharaoh gathered his guys around him and had verse 37 and verse 38 in a private conversation. I don't know. But I can imagine Pharaoh sitting there and he's got his wise men over to one side or the other. And let's look at verse 37. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, fellas, interpretation here, can we find such a one as this? Guys, do we have somebody out there that's like this? I don't know anybody. Do you know anybody that's like this? Do you know anybody that a man in whom the Spirit of God is? Guys, do we have somebody over here in the wings somewhere that I don't know about that has got an attitude like this? Do we have somebody that is going to be discreet and wise like this? Do we have somebody? This guy's a foreigner. Do we have anybody like this? No, Pharaoh, we don't have anybody like that. We're a bunch of corrupt politicians. I can imagine this conversation going on. No, Pharaoh, he's a pretty straightforward fella. I can imagine maybe that captain of the guard came up with Joseph and a part of the escort of it and going, Pharaoh, I've seen a lot of Egyptian inmates. I've seen a lot of foreign inmates over the years. This one tops them all. He is the best of the best. He's got a good attitude. I trusted him. He let himself in and out of the jail cell. I never once had to worry about losing my head over him. If I'm willing to trust him with my life, Pharaoh, I would be willing to trust him with my family's life too. The testimony of this young man, the servant's attitude that he had towards it. Then you look at the benefits of this. Sorry, I may be a little carnal here this morning on this, but I go down through here and Pharaoh brings Joseph up. He says, verse 42, and Pharaoh took the ring off his hand, put it on Joseph's hand, arrayed him in vestures of fine linen and a gold chain about his neck. He went from the prison clothes to he is second in command. He's second in command. God's given him everything. Why? Because he had a good attitude, a servant's attitude, and Joseph never lost that attitude the rest of his life. Now keep going down through here. He made him to ride second in the chariot which he had, and they cried before him, bowed the knee. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called his name Zephanaphah, And he gave unto him his wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. So here's Joseph. He goes from having nothing. Then he goes, and Pharaoh goes, I'm going to give you the clothes that you need. I'm going to give you the car that you need, the chariot. And then I'm going to give you the wife that you need. Now I'm going to say this. I don't believe Joseph got anybody. Sorry, I'm just thinking about, as I was looking at this morning, I believe he got a pretty woman. You say, why? Because. Why Pharaoh gave him the best of everything else. Why not give him a good wife? I can imagine Pharaoh looking at him, sorry, this is just me a little bit about it. Hey, you've not been on the dating scene. Let me get you a wife. And not only did he give her a wife, I believe he gave her a wife that was going to be good for him and help him where he was weak. You say, why? I don't know that for sure, but she's the daughter of this Potiphar, the priest of On. She's got to know about royalty. She's got to know how to come in and out from before the king. She's got to know some of the cultures and the finer points of Egypt. And I believe that this was part of God saying, Joseph, I'm going to take your short end. I'm going to help shore you up just a little bit, and you're going to have the best of it all. Because you've had a good attitude. You've adjusted your attitude maybe when it's been bad, and you've had a good one. And God blessed Joseph with this. My friends, this morning, I just want to think about this, and that God, no matter what we're going through, we may look at it on this side and go, well, you know what? I don't have the nicest car. I don't have the nicest house. No, but we're only here for a little while. And yes, God can bless. I believe God can supply and God can give. But how much better is it when we get to the other side? If we'll just keep our head up and keep a right attitude about us. You say, what are you getting at? I believe Potiphar kind of symbolizes the Lord a little bit. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. You've been good. You've had a good attitude through this. Here's what you got. I'm going to take care of everything. It's going to be a little bit in reverse. We're the bridegroom. We're the bride and he's the bridegroom. Get it correct here just a second. But I've got everything for you. Everything you need. Where you've been weak, you're going to be strong. I've got it all. Sit back. It's taken care of. What kind of attitude do we have this morning as we're serving the Lord? Brother Gregory.